Hi, I'm Dr. Roseann, and I'm a mental health trailblazer. And join me as we have real conversations about real solutions to kids' problems. And today, we're talking about failure to launch syndrome. What is it? Why do kids have it? And why do we got this epidemic? Let's dive in. This is It's Going to Be Okay with Dr. Roseann, and we're talking about failure to launch syndrome. What is it? What's the number one thing you need to do? And I know this is everyone's fear that your kid's living in your basement, but your kid might be living in your basement and he might be 27 and you feel pretty stuck. They feel stuck, you feel stuck, and there's things that got to happen. But, what is failure to launch? So, about 1/3 of people in the United States ages 18 to 34 still live at home with their parents. Now, not all of that is failure to launch. Some of them want to live at home. Some of them it's financial. There's a lot of reasons why. But we do have a surge of people who are failing to launch. And some of them didn't even bother to launch, but some of them go to college. And I want to talk about, what are these symptoms? What happens? And boy, people get stuck. And the longer you get stuck, the harder it is to get out of it, peeps. You already know that. And this is one of my most read blog series is my failure to launch blogs, because there aren't a lot of resources and people don't know what to do. And we do get a lot of people who come into our Facebook group. You can go to drroseann.com/group for support. But a lot of people come to work with us, and you can take our solution matcher. You can apply drroseann.com, apply. But let's not talk about that. Let's talk about what is failure to launch. What are some of these symptoms? And why is it such an epidemic, right? So some of the things that we look for in understanding, obviously your kid is stuck, and they're typically, if you can, for those of you that don't know what failure to launch, you can't even imagine it. I was like, I'm 18, I'm out of here. And I said to my parents, can I go to school in Florida? And they were like, yes. And I was like, get me out of here. I wound up coming back to school in Connecticut, not because I was doing anything wrong, is because I was like, oh, these people are partiers. I gotta be serious because I want to get my doctorate. And I wind up going to state school, and it was the best decision I ever made. And I met Mr. Hodge, and the rest is history. But let's talk about some of these symptoms besides the actual being stuck and not doing anything, right? So one, there's a financial dependency. These kids can't really live on their own. And some of the behaviors that you see, right, is often there is a mental health issue in their history. We may have had a diagnosis of things like autism, OCD. You might have health issues like PANS and PANDAS or Lyme disease or other things. These are very common things that we see when we support young adults. My oldest failure to launch was somebody in their 30s, and they all just sort of got stuck in patterns. And there was a undiagnosed, not formally diagnosed clinical issue that wasn't addressed. And we addressed the clinical issue, and he launched out of his house. But it was just unbelievable because his parents were so nice, and he was so nice actually too. And they were like, should we go on vacation without him? I'm like, he's got a job. He's totally normal and stable, and you're feeding into this behavior, and he's 30 something years old. And they were like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that. They just saw themselves in the mirror, and I was like, you're getting anxious, right? Because he was a failure to launch. And there was really, I'm oversimplifying it, but they had tried a million things. And actually his sister wrote me one of the most beautiful emails. She's a writer that I had ever received in my life, and how how transformative it was for the entire family, because again, these were nice people and people get stuck, but had an undiagnosed and untreated mental health issue that needed to be dealt with. And that is pretty common. So a lot of times my failure to launch college kids make it to college because they're good students with a lot of structure and a lot of support. So they may have had a 504, they might have had an IEP, they might not have had any of that. They might have been on medication. And then there's a lot of kind of making sure things are done. They go to college, they completely fall apart. I have had college students, and it is the number one reason why people leave college is mental health. And I've had students never go to class, go to college, and never go to class. I've had college students, make it at different points throughout that first year. I've had many college students where they flunk the whole year, not because of partying, because they're struggling mentally and everyone knows it. And the parents send them back the next year without treatment. So going to college is not the fix, right? Getting the job is not the fix. And I want you to know that those are two of the biggest pushes that parents have. They think if they just push them out, they'll go, right? But that's not what happens when you have an untreated mental health issue. You have to deal with a mental health issue, right? So what are some other signs and symptoms of failure to launch? So we often have poor communication. And I often see this in the whole family because everyone's shut down. The child is resistant, the adult child, they're avoidant and resistant to help. Okay. Super common when everything is broken down and you're a young adult and you're ashamed as all can be. And then parents are like, get a job, get a job, get a job, go to school. And they're stuck. And they just literally, you're like, I can't see it. I can't see it. It's like when you're looking for your glasses and they're on your head, right? I was looking for my phone yesterday. It was like right next to me. I'm like, I clearly took a sauna last night. I was like, I need to detox. I'm getting a little foggy. But we have to have good communication skills. And I think, that is a really important part of getting better. And it doesn't always happen. These kids often have low or no motivation. And when you look back in their history, motivation could have always been an issue, but that structure helped it, right? Which is good that structure helped it. But it also meant that in a lot of my cases, they never addressed the mental health issue because the grades were good, because they put the structure in place. So when somebody has low motivation, you got to dig a little bit, right? And understand what that's about. And we can't also think, that you're doing all this stuff and then you're going to be on your own, right? So you can't say to yourself like, okay, you just got your driver's license, go out and drive on the highway. You've never driven. We wouldn't do that, right? Okay. So it's the same. We have to, just because somebody is intelligent doesn't mean they have the coping skills or resources to make it in school. And, kids with failure to launch have a history of low stress tolerance and poor coping skills. And that is so important to understand that because, good coping skills is going to serve you in every aspect of your life, right? Kids with failure to launch tend to have gaming addictions, tech addictions, and, and some of that is in place of friendships, and they might not have friendships and they go to those things. Other times it develops as they fail to launch and the depression sets in. Okay. And the same breath of choosing an unhealthy way to manage what's going on, we often typically have excessive marijuana usage. And just because you're not smoking pot all the time or at all doesn't mean you're not a failure to launch. These are just things that are more common in failure to launch. But at the crux of failure to launch is typically a mental health issue that has not been properly addressed. These are not kids that want to just live there. I recently was speaking to a failure to launch young man who there were issues many, many years before. His mother had heard me speak a minimum of 6 years before they actually brought him in. And, it was very clear to me he was on the autism spectrum by the way he was talking to me. And just knowing about his history. And I had spoken to his mom more than once over the years. And he did well in school. So she never pursued the treatment. And then, he didn't make it. He didn't make it. It's not just an expensive lesson. It is a real worrisome lesson because you are saying you're not successful. And in order to get somebody back to college once they've hit bottom, it's not easy. And so in this case, the conflict was really, really there. And, when we think about what are the causes of failure to launch syndrome, there's a lot, right? And just some of the symptoms is the overlap with the causes. Typically, it's a improperly dealt with mental health issue, a behavioral issue, a neurodevelopmental issue. And it also can be very poor family communication, as well as that individual having difficulties with communication in general and coping, right? So why is all the surge in failure to launch? Well, we have a surge in mental health problems. We also have a huge surge in autism. And my experience is that I have had many autistics come to me with failure to launch. And, it's because we just didn't put the proper things in place for them to be successful at school. And a lot of times when we do, then it really resolves the situation. I think a lot of times, especially when somebody's on an IEP, parents don't realize how much support they actually get in school. And, they don't plan for that when they go to college. You're not getting a lot of support in college unless you're going to a special school, which are very few, or you're enrolled in a special program, or you're paying for that support. So what's my best tip for failure to launch, right? And, at a later episode, we'll talk about specific symptoms. I have a whole blog series. You can go to drroseann.com/my blog. Just search failure to launch. There's several blogs on it. And I'm pretty proud of them, and they're well written, and they're a resource for many. But my best tip is really to focus on parenting help. And when you have a failure to launch child, your child is probably avoidant and resistant to help. You're usually stuck. And when they're stuck, you need to get the help in how to foster communication, how to support their stress tolerance, how to get in there slowly to do treatment and therapy, because they need treatment. They need therapy. There is no way they don't. And this isn't going to just magically resolve, like I said, by getting a job. That's usually what I hear. I'll get somebody who's had like OCD so severe they can't do anything. And then we go and do a review and they're like, so shouldn't they be getting a job? And I'm like, well, that's a good goal. Let's make a plan for that. Right. And, we can't, if you spent so much time being stuck, we want to foster those positive behaviors, the communication. We want to make sure things are secure before we add to it. Yes, you should be functioning and productive in society. There's no doubt. But, we are, not going to give a 3-year-old a license to drive, are we? Right. And just because somebody's older doesn't mean they have the skills there. We want to make sure that we've addressed that mental health issue that hasn't been addressed, so that they can be successful and they can launch. And I've seen that really happen. But my number one best tip, if you're a parent of somebody with a failure to launch, is to get therapy for yourself. If you can get your child to come with you, great. If you can't, go and find somebody who understands this and can support you. And if it's you on your own, or even better, if you have a spouse or a partner, it's important. You need your own mental health support, because it's very scary. It's very frightening. And this is really the way to help develop good mental health in your adult child, is by getting the right support for yourself and communication tools to work with them. So I hope this was helpful. If you're struggling with a failure to launch child, you can always apply to work with us, drroseann.com/apply. But you can't make your child come to therapy. You've got to go for yourself.